Well, we're in Psalm 97 today as we make our way through the Psalms in 2024. So glad you're joining with me in this, and so glad you are partnering with me. I know a lot of you pray for me, and I appreciate that. And a lot of you support me financially as well, and I do appreciate that. There's expenses associated with the online ministry, and you help me defray those. Plus, you give me the opportunity to teach and preach at various places. I have an opportunity, in fact, coming up in Uganda, of all places, next April. So if you'd like to contribute to that, that would be very helpful to defray my travel costs and things to go there. So let's get into the psalm today, Psalm 97. It's another enthronement psalm. That is a psalm that Israel would sing or recite at the inauguration of a new king. It's kind of a celebration of God continuing to fulfill his Davidic covenant to Israel to place a Davidic king on the throne. And these are a series that we've seen, I think, from Psalm 92, and they go through 100, Psalm 100, a series of enthronement psalms. Of course, each of these are for the king of Israel, one of the Davidic kings. So this would be limited to the southern kingdom, Judah and Benjamin, forming that tribe of kingdom of Judah in the south. And again, a corporate expression of joy of God's faithfulness, a recognition of his faithfulness. And it is celebrating the next king. Sometimes the king was good, like Hezekiah or Josiah. Other times the king was not so good. But nevertheless, everyone's optimistic at the crowning of a new king. Ultimately, of course, this is anticipation of the ultimate Davidic king, of the Messiah that's coming. So these psalms find their true fullness, I think, in Jesus when he is enthroned in Revelation chapter 20 when he brings his kingdom to the earth. In terms of outline, I've frankly stolen Steve Lawson's outline from his Holman Standard Commentary on the Book of Psalms. It's a great resource if you want to spend some money on a 2-volume resource to help you get through the Psalms on your own. He has emphasizes the fact, and I think rightly so, that in this psalm we see the sovereignty of God. So important for everything, really. Sovereignty is the center of a Christian worldview, to know that God is in charge of everything, that God is orchestrating every event. As R.C. Sproul once said, there's no maverick molecules, that God has got everything down to the molecular level in control. That gives us great peace and great, really, serenity in a very difficult world that we live in. Seems to be getting more difficult. So, in terms of, again, the outline, verse 1 is the sovereignty of God is highlighted. The Lord reigns. Let the earth rejoice. Let the many islands be glad. So the whole surface of the earth is rejoicing and relieved because of the sovereignty of God. Verses 2 through 6 labeled severe. God is severe. He's a judge. He brings judgment, righteousness, and judgment to the earth. He is in the light of his judgment and in the light of the fallenness of all creation, the earth trembles. And in verse 6, the heavens declare his righteousness and see his glory. We see this in Psalm 19 as well, that there's no escaping from the judgment of God or the recognition that he reigns and rules. Verses 7 to 9, God is solitary, that he is God alone. There are no other gods. People would substitute other gods for him. Perhaps not so much a idol, although we know that the world is full of Roman Catholics and Muslims and all kinds of idol worshiping religions. And this is a declaration that he alone is God in verses 7 to 9. And then finally in verses 10 to 12, to the end of the psalm, excuse me, my throat's kind of dry this morning, we see God is faithful. He guards in verses 10. He delivers at the end of verse 10. He enlightens the mind and he gladdens the heart. So he is faithful to his followers. Our here verse, of course, you can see that is verse 10. Let me just highlight a couple things in that verse. One is kind of this startling word, I think, is a resting word, hate. Hate evil means to have an intense and passionate dislike of it. You know, hate is a word that's used so often that it kind of loses its impact. You know, I hate peas. I hate beets, for example. I hate it when it's cloudy. I hate it when it's windy. I hate it when it's snowing. I hate it when it's too hot. A lot of people toss that word around when they really mean they're inconvenienced by it or it's not their favorite. But hate is really an intense and passionate dislike. And it's directed toward evil, which I would say is basically anything that's not God, anything that God does not approve of. I'll discuss some of the things that God hates, be a good place to start. But, he hates sexual immorality, for example. God hates the thoughts of the evil, the wicked ones. So it's an object of intense dislike, passionate dislike, and it's really not compatible with ones who love God. Hate evil, you who love God. Hate and love are not incompatible, but they're compatible. In fact, the hatred of evil is consistent and a mark of those who love God. So the more you cultivate a love for the Lord, the more you nurture that in your heart, the more you will hate evil. Why would God do this? Psalm gives us two reasons. Why would the ones who love God hate evil? Two reasons. One, God preserves the godly ones. Number two, he delivers them from the hand of the wicked. I think what's being referred to here is God's active intervention in the life of those who love him and who he loves. I think he's saying that God was going to preserve them from evil, that God's going to deliver them from evil, their mind, their emotions, and their will. They are all kept from it. In other words, God will preserve them. This is part of God's prerogative as sovereign. Sometimes we acknowledge God being sovereign over history or sovereign over things that happen in our lives, but we deny him his sovereignty in things like salvation of his people, that we start getting upset when we talk about election. Don't shut me off at this point, at least hear me out, that God is not only sovereign over everything in the universe, but he's also sovereign over salvation, that he chooses who will believe. And they, in fact, do believe, not against their will. He doesn't coerce them. He doesn't force them. He doesn't twist their arm behind their back, spiritually speaking, to force them to believe. Neither does he force them to flee from sin, to hate evil. Doesn't force them to do this, but he cultivates in them a love for himself. And the more you love God, the more you hate evil. So how do we apply this? Well, a couple ways. Number one, I think cultivate that love for God. How do we do that? We spend time in his word and not just reading through it quickly to check off the list of our current reading plan, but to spend some time like we are in these here verses to reflect on the Lord, to reflect on his character, to reflect on the evidences of love, the evidences of his judgment, to cultivate a appreciation of God's own election of us, his choosing of us, His sanctification of us, and the assured glorification that's in our future. So one way to do this is to cultivate love for the Lord. The other is to hate the things that God hates. And I think that this is kind of inversely related. The more you love the Lord, the more you begin to become like him. The more you become like him and love him, the more you will hate the things that God hates. What are those things? Well, Proverbs 6:16 to 19 gives us a clear guidance on that. Haughty eyes, lies, the shedding of innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that run to do evil, false witnesses, and one that spreads strife. You know, the busybody, the gossip, the one who's always churning up conflict, the critical one. These are the 7 things that God hates. You might do well to look at Proverbs 6:16 to 19, and see if these are the things that you hate. If they are, or you're growing in your hatred of these things, then it's actually a good sign. It's a sign that you're loving the Lord more. If you find yourself complacent before these things, if you find yourself not appalled or passionately opposed to them, then perhaps what you need to be doing is cultivating a love for God. So to respond to this, I'd say, first of all, thank God for the preservation and deliverance of your soul, that he has not only worked at the moment of your salvation, but is progressively working in you now through this period of sanctification that we live in. And then work hard at cultivating both a love for God and a hatred for the things that God hates. And I think you'll find, brothers and sisters, that as you grow in your love, then you'll also grow in your intolerance of the things that God hates. God bless you.